The pursuit lasted 3 hours. The Terran fleet chased the retreating Kragath ships across the Veltran system like hunters tracking wounded animals. Every time the enemy tried to regroup, the humans would strike from an unexpected angle. Every time the Kragath attempted to form a defensive line, the Terrans would punch through it with overwhelming force. Lieutenant Doyen fired another salvo from the Indomitable's railguns. The solid metal slugs crossed the distance in seconds and slammed into a Kragath cruiser. The impact tore through the ship's engine section. Atmosphere vented into space in a white plume as the vessel went dark and began tumbling. Target neutralized, Doyen reported. Acquiring next target. Captain G1 studied the tactical display. The Kragath fleet was breaking apart. Some ships fled toward the system's edge. Others tried to rally around High Admiral Dorium's flagship. But there was no coordination anymore. No grand strategy. Just fear and confusion. This is what happens when you fight an enemy who only knows one way to wage war. G1 said quietly. They practice the same tactics for centuries. They become predictable, and when someone breaks their pattern, they do not know how to adapt. Her executive officer nodded. The Kragath fight like they are playing a game with rules. We fight like we are trying to survive. G1 smiled grimly. Exactly. War has no rules, only winners and losers. Across the battlefield, the other Terran ships demonstrated the same philosophy. The TCS Valiant performed a maneuver that should have been impossible. It rotated 180 degrees while still moving forward, allowing it to fire both forward and rear weapons at the same time. 2 Kragath destroyers were caught in the crossfire and disabled within seconds. The TCS Relentless lived up to its name. It had taken severe damage to its port side, but the crew simply sealed off that section and kept fighting with the remaining weapons. The ship's engineer, a man named Taiyang, worked miracles keeping the vessel operational. Captain, Taiyang called over the comm. We have fires in sections 7 through 12. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 5, power fluctuating, and the coffee maker in the mess hall is broken. His captain laughed despite the situation. Can we still fight? Sir, we have 3 working railguns, 2 missile tubes, and 1 very angry Marine detachment that wants revenge for their coffee. Yes, we can still fight. Then we fight. This was humanity's doctrine. Build ships with so much redundancy that they could lose half their systems and still remain combat effective. Train every crew member to handle multiple roles. Never give up. Never surrender. Keep fighting until the enemy breaks, and the Kragath were breaking. Colonel Minji stood on the bridge of the captured Kragath capital ship. Her Marines had renamed it the Terran Prize, and were using it to coordinate boarding actions across the battlefield. She studied the tactical data her team had pulled from the enemy computers. Interesting, she said. The Kragath train their warriors for ship operations, but they have zero doctrine for internal combat, no breaching procedures, no room-clearing tactics, no close-quarters combat training. They are helpless once we get inside. Sergeant Hana looked up from her station. She was a small woman, but fierce in combat. Colonel, why would they ignore boarding actions? It seems like an obvious vulnerability. Minji thought about it. Because most species fight wars at a distance. Energy weapons and missiles from thousands of kilometers away. Boarding actions are messy and dangerous. Most civilizations consider them barbaric. But humans do not care about looking civilized, Hana said. No, Minji agreed. We care about winning. She opened a channel to the Indomitable. Captain G1, we have accessed the enemy's tactical network. I am sending you their command codes and communication protocols. We can listen to everything they are saying. Excellent work, Colonel. Stand by for new orders. G1 took the information and immediately put it to use. She broadcast the footage of Colonel Minji's boarding action across all Kragath channels. Every ship in the enemy fleet saw human Marines storming through corridors, overwhelming defenders and capturing vessels. The psychological impact was immediate. Psychological warfare, G1 explained to Commander Hyun, who was observing from the Velthran station. We are not just fighting their ships. We are fighting their will to resist. Once they see that resistance is futile, they will begin to question whether this battle is worth dying for. Hyun watched in fascination. This is brilliant and terrifying. You are weaponizing fear itself. War is not just about killing the enemy, G1 said. It is about breaking their desire to fight. We learned that lesson thousands of years ago. On High Admiral Dorium's flagship, panic was spreading. The bridge crew watched the boarding footage with horror. They saw their fellow Kragath being overwhelmed by armored human warriors who moved with inhuman precision. They saw ships being captured and turned against the fleet. "We need reinforcements," Dorim said to Empress Valkara. "The enemy is too strong. Their tactics are beyond anything we have encountered." Valkara's face was twisted with rage. "You commanded 300 ships against 12 and you are losing. This is unacceptable." "These are not normal adversaries," Dorim protested. "They fight without regard for their own safety. They board our ships like pirates. They use weapons we abandoned as primitive. They are barbarians." "Then you should have no trouble defeating barbarians," Valkara said coldly. "I am sending the reserve fleets. 400 additional vessels are being recalled from the outer territories. They will arrive in 6 hours. You will hold until then." "Yes, Empress." Dorim closed the channel and looked at his tactical officer. "Can we hold for 6 hours?" The officer studied the display. "Unknown, sir. The Terrans are not fighting like any enemy we have faced. They do not retreat when damaged. They do not break formation under fire. Every ship captain seems to have complete freedom to act independently. It creates chaos that is somehow coordinated. Organized chaos," Dorim muttered. "How do you fight an enemy that thrives in disorder?" He did not have an answer. Neither did any of his officers. The Kragath had conquered dozens of species, but they had never faced anyone like the humans. Species that fought conventionally could be defeated conventionally, but humanity did not follow the rules. A Kragath destroyer suddenly broke away from the formation. It was broadcasting on all channels. "This is Captain Vorath of the destroyer Blade of Conquest. I am surrendering my vessel to the Terran forces. I request quarter under the terms of honorable defeat." The transmission stunned everyone. The Kragath Empire had never practiced surrender. It was considered the ultimate dishonor. But Captain Vorath had watched his fleet being destroyed, and decided survival was more important than honor. Colonel Minji responded immediately. "Captain Vorath, this is Colonel Minji of the Terran Coalition Marines. We accept your surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your crew will be treated fairly under the rules of war." "Rules of war?" Vorath sounded confused. "What are these rules?" Minji explained patiently. "Once you surrender, you are no longer an enemy combatant. You become a prisoner of war. We will not harm you if you do not resist. We will provide food, medical care, and safe quarters. When the war ends, you will be returned to your people. You will not execute us? No, that would be a war crime." Vorath was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Your species has rules even for war? You bring civilization to chaos?" "We try," Minji replied. "We learned the hard way that wars without rules become genocides. We prefer to be better than that." The destroyer powered down its weapons. A Terran boarding party arrived and took control without incident. They treated the Kragath crew with respect, providing water and medical attention to the wounded. The prisoners were confused but grateful. Other Kragath ships watched this exchange. They saw that surrender was possible, that the Terrans did not simply kill everyone they defeated. The idea spread like wildfire through the fleet. Within an hour, 5 more Kragath vessels surrendered. Then 10, then 20. High Admiral Dorim watched his fleet disintegrate as ships chose survival over honor. "Stop them," he roared. "Any ship that surrenders will be branded traitor. Their families will be punished." But the threats rang hollow. The crews could see that the Terrans treated prisoners well, while the Kragath leadership offered only death. The choice became obvious. Captain Jiwan opened a channel to Dorim's flagship. "High Admiral, I am offering you one chance to end this without further bloodshed. Surrender your fleet and I promise you and your crews will be treated according to the laws of war. No executions, no torture, just detainment until peace is negotiated." Dorim stared at the human woman on his screen. She looked young by Kragath standards, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much war. She was not offering mercy out of weakness. She was offering it because she preferred peace to more killing. "I cannot surrender," Dorim said finally. "The Empress would execute my family. My people would consider me a coward." "Then you choose death," Jiwan said sadly. "I am sorry." She closed the channel and gave new orders. "All ships focus fire on the enemy flagship. Disable only. I want prisoners, not corpses." The Terran fleet concentrated their attack. Railguns targeted the flagship's engines. Plasma torpedoes struck weapon emplacements. Missiles destroyed sensor arrays. The battle was over, but the work was just beginning. 42 Terran ships floated in space surrounded by hundreds of disabled Kragath vessels. Some were captured intact. Others were barely holding together. All of them held prisoners who needed care. Captain Jiwon stood on the bridge of the Indomitable watching the recovery operations. Medical ships moved between the wrecks pulling out survivors. Marine teams secured prisoners and transferred them to temporary holding areas on the larger vessels. Engineers worked to stabilize damaged reactors before they could explode. Casualty report, Jiwon ordered. Her executive officer checked the data. We lost 4 ships destroyed completely. 11 more are heavily damaged but salvageable. Human casualties are 327 dead, 1,042 wounded. Velthran casualties are estimated at 15,000. Kragath casualties are approximately 90,000 dead, 200,000 prisoners. Jiwon closed her eyes. 327 of her people were dead. 327 families would receive news that their loved ones were not coming home. The victory tasted like ashes in her mouth. Make sure every fallen crew member is accounted for, she said quietly. I will write to every family personally. They deserve to know their sacrifice meant something. Yes, ma'am. On the surface of SciFiPrime, celebrations were erupting in every city. The people had watched the battle from their homes. They had seen their world about to be conquered. Then they had witnessed the impossible. 12 human ships had arrived and turned the tide. Then 42 ships had defeated 400. Commander Hyun stood in the capital city watching fireworks light up the night sky. Around him, Velthran citizens were crying with joy and relief. Children ran through the streets waving flags. Some flags showed Velthran symbols. Others showed a new design, the emblem of the Terran coalition. They are calling them the Warriors from Terra, his aide said. There are already songs being written, statues being planned. Our people will never forget what they did. Hyun nodded slowly. Neither will the rest of the galaxy. Every species is watching now. They saw what happened here. The balance of power has changed forever. In orbit, Admiral Kwan's flagship received a priority transmission. It was from the Galactic Council, the governing body of major civilizations. They wanted to speak with him immediately. Kwan accepted the call. The holographic display showed 12 representatives from different species. They all looked uncomfortable. Some seemed afraid. Others appeared calculating. None of them seemed happy. Admiral Kwan, the council speaker said. He was a Trilaxian named Morthus. We have witnessed your actions in the Velthran system. Your military capabilities are impressive. The council requests your presence for immediate discussions regarding humanity's place in galactic affairs. Kwan smiled coldly. You mean you ignored the Velthran's cries for help and now you want to talk because you're afraid of us? Morthus shifted uncomfortably. The situation is more complex than that. No, it is not, Kwan replied. The Velthran sent 47 distress calls. 47 times they begged for help. And 47 times the council did nothing. You let the Kragath commit genocide because you were too afraid to stop them. We are not. You had no authority to intervene in council space, an Osern delegate protested. You are an unknown species. You could be a threat. We are a threat, Kwan agreed, but only to those who prey on the innocent. The Velthran called for help. We answered. If that makes us dangerous in your eyes, then maybe you should look in a mirror and ask yourself why. The council members whispered among themselves. Finally, Morthus spoke again. Admiral, the council wishes to establish diplomatic relations with the Terran coalition. We want to understand your people and your intentions. Our intentions are simple, Kwan said. We want peace, but we will not tolerate genocide, slavery, or the destruction of peaceful civilizations. If another species commits those acts, we will stop them. Is that clear? You cannot police the entire galaxy, Morthus protested. Watch us. The transmission ended. Kwan turned to his staff. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need more ships out here. A lot more ships. On the captured Kragath flagship, Colonel Minji walked through the prisoner-holding areas. Thousands of Kragath warriors sat in organized rows. They were given food, water, and medical care. Human guards patrolled but did not threaten the prisoners. One Kragath officer approached Minji. His name was Korvath. He had commanded a destroyer before surrendering. Colonel, may I ask a question? You may. Why do you treat us with dignity? We are your enemies. In Kragath culture, prisoners are slaves at best. But you give us food and healing. You do not torture us. Why? Minji considered her answer carefully. Because we believe all beings have worth. Even enemies. Once you surrendered, you stopped being a threat. You became a prisoner, and prisoners have rights under our laws. This is difficult to understand, Korvath admitted. The Kragath way is strength dominates weakness. The victor takes everything. Your mercy seems like weakness. It is not weakness, Minji said firmly. It is strength. It takes more courage to show mercy than to kill, more discipline to follow rules than to give in to anger. We fight brutally, but we do not become brutal. That is what separates us from tyrants. Korvath thought about this. If our positions were reversed, we would have killed you all. Yet you give us life. This is a powerful weapon, Colonel. It makes us question everything the Empress taught us. Good, Minji replied. Question everything. That is how civilizations grow. In her throne room on her remaining flagship, Empress Valkyra sat in silence. Her military advisor stood around her, afraid to speak. She had watched her empire's greatest fleets destroyed by a species she had never heard of before. It was impossible. It was humiliating. How? She finally asked. How did they defeat us? Her senior advisor, a veteran of 30 campaigns, spoke carefully. Empress, the humans fight with a philosophy we do not understand. They accept casualties we would consider defeat. They take risks we would consider suicide, and yet they win because they never stop fighting. They are barbarians, Valkyra spat. Perhaps, the advisor agreed, but they are effective barbarians, and they have something we do not. What? They fight for something bigger than themselves. Our warriors fight for glory and conquest. The humans fight for an idea. They believe all life has value. That belief makes them willing to die protecting strangers. It gives them strength we cannot match. Valkyra was silent for a long moment. Then she stood. Send a message to the Terran fleet. I wish to negotiate terms of surrender. Empress, you cannot. Another advisor protested. It would mean the end of the Empire. The Empire is already ended, Valkyra said bitterly. The humans proved that. Better to negotiate now while we still have something to bargain with. The surrender negotiations took place on a neutral vessel provided by the Galactic Council. Empress Valkyra sat across from Admiral Quan. Between them sat observers from 20 different species. The galaxy was watching. Terms, Valkyra said simply. Quan opened a data pad. The Kragath Empire will immediately cease all military operations. All conquered species will be released and given the right to self-determination. Your military fleet will be reduced to defensive forces only. You will pay reparations to the Velthran people for the damage caused, and you will stand trial at a galactic tribunal for crimes against sentient beings. Valkyra wanted to rage, to refuse. But she had seen what happened to those who defied the humans. And if I refuse? Then we will dismantle your empire system by system until you have nothing left but a prison cell. Quan replied calmly. These terms are generous. Take them. Valkyra knew she had no choice. She signed the agreement. The Kragath Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for 200 years, surrendered to a species that had been in space for less than 100. The news spread across known space within hours. Every civilization heard the same story. Humanity had arrived. They had defeated the undefeatable. They had shown mercy to the merciless. They had changed everything. On Velthran Prime, Commander Hyun was appointed as his people's ambassador to Earth. He would travel to the human homeworld and establish formal relations. Before he left, he visited Captain Jiwon one last time. I do not know how to thank you, Hyun said. You saved my people, my world, my civilization. Jiwon smiled warmly. You called for help. We answered. That is what neighbors do. Are we neighbors then? Humanity and the Velthran? I hope so. The galaxy needs more species willing to stand up for what is right. Maybe together we can make this a better place. Hyun bowed deeply. You have our eternal gratitude. After he left, Jiwon stood looking out at the stars. Dr. Yuna approached her quietly. Captain Earth Command sent new orders. They want you to establish the first Terran expeditionary fleet. There are more distress signals coming in from across the galaxy. How many? 17 so far. Species being oppressed. Worlds being conquered. The same story as the Velthran, repeated dozens of times. Jiwon felt tired. We cannot save everyone. No, Yuna agreed. But we can try. That is what makes us human. Jiwon straightened her shoulders. Then we try. Assemble the fleet. We have work to do. Captain Jiwon stood calmly on the bridge of the TCS Indomitable as energy blasts hammered against the ship's hull. The deck shook beneath her feet, but she barely moved. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quick efficiency. No one panicked. No one screamed. They had trained for this. Hull integrity at 92%, her engineering officer reported. Ablative armor is absorbing the hits as expected. Good, Jiwan said. Maintain current speed. Weapons, I want firing solutions on their lead capital ships. Aye, Captain, Lieutenant Doyen replied from the weapons station. His fingers danced across the controls. Solutions locked. Awaiting your command. Jiwan watched the tactical display. The Kragath fleet was spreading out, trying to surround the human vessels. It was a standard encirclement tactic, effective against most species. But humans had fought wars where being surrounded was just another Tuesday. All ships execute pattern Delta 3, Jiwan ordered over the fleet channel. Close to point-blank range. Show them what we brought. The 12 Terran vessels split into 4 groups of 3. They moved with precision, weaving through the Kragath formation like sharks through a school of fish. The enemy fired continuously, but the human ships were fast and their armor was thick. Every hit that landed was absorbed by layered plates of composite metal and ceramic. The Velthran defense station watched in amazement. Commander Hyun could not believe what he was seeing. The Terran ships were taking damage that would have destroyed any Velthran vessel. But they kept moving. They kept fighting. Get me a tactical analysis, Hyun ordered. How are they surviving? His tactical officer studied the readings. Sir, their armor appears to be designed to ablate. Each hit burns away a layer, but there are dozens of layers, and their hull structure is redundant. Even if one section is breached, the ship remains functional. It is like they built their vessels expecting to be hit. What species builds ships expecting to be damaged? Hyun whispered. A species that knows war, his second officer replied quietly. On the Indomitable, Jiwan opened a channel to Commander Hyun. Commander, we are transmitting our tactical data to your station. I recommend you move your remaining ships behind our formation. We will handle the assault. Captain Jiwan, Hyun said carefully, I appreciate your courage, but you must understand. The Kragath have never lost a major battle. Their tactics are proven over centuries of conquest. Jiwan smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Commander, my species has been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We have fought on land, sea, air, and space. We have fought each other in conflicts that killed millions. We know tactics the Kragath have never seen because we invented them fighting ourselves. Trust me, we know what we are doing. Before Hyun could respond, the Terran fleet opened fire. The effect was immediate and devastating. Railguns fired solid metal slugs at a fraction of light speed. Plasma torpedoes burned through space like miniature suns. And then came the missiles. Dozens of them from each ship, spreading out in complex patterns. The Kragath point defense systems engaged, but they were overwhelmed. The human weapons came from too many angles at once. Explosions blossomed across the enemy formation. 3 Kragath destroyers were crippled in the first salvo. A 4th vessel lost power and began drifting. High Admiral Dorham stared at his tactical display in shock. What are these weapons? Report! His weapons officer struggled to respond. Admiral, they are using kinetic rounds, plasma weapons, and chemical explosives simultaneously. Our shields are designed to stop energy weapons. The kinetic rounds are passing through. And those missiles? They are nuclear warheads, sir. Nuclear? Dorham felt cold. Nuclear weapons were considered primitive. Most species abandoned them millennia ago in favor of cleaner energy weapons. But there was nothing clean about what the Terrans were using. Those warheads were dirty, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. All ships focus fire on the lead Terran vessel, Dorham ordered. Destroy it now. 50 Kragath ships turned their weapons on the Indomitable. The combined firepower would have vaporized a small moon. Energy beams converged on the human ship from every direction. Jiwan watched the incoming fire with calm eyes. Evasive pattern Theta. All power to forward armor. Helm, take us through their formation. The Indomitable twisted like a living thing. It rolled, dove, and accelerated in ways that should have torn the ship apart. The Kragath weapons tracked it, but the human vessel moved unpredictably. Some shots missed entirely. Others glanced off the angled armor plates, and the Indomitable kept coming. It plowed through the Kragath formation like a battering ram. As it passed each enemy ship, it fired at point-blank range. Railguns punched through hulls. Plasma torpedoes melted armor. Missiles struck weak points with surgical precision. Captain, we have breached their defensive line, the helmsman reported. We are in the middle of their formation. Perfect, Jiwan said. Colonel Minji, you are cleared for boarding action. In the Indomitable's hangar bay, Colonel Minji stood with her Marines. They were armored in powered combat suits that made them look like mechanical warriors. Each Marine carried weapons that ranged from rifles to heavy cannons. They were ready for war. "Listen up," Minji said over the squad channel. "The Kragath think war is about ship-to-ship combat. They think battles are won by blowing each other up from a distance. They have never fought humans. They have never experienced boarding action. We are going to teach them." The Marines cheered. Minji smiled inside her helmet. Her people had been fighting wars before they learned to fly. They had perfected ground combat over thousands of years of bitter experience. The Kragath were about to learn what real war looked like. Boarding torpedoes away, the launch officer called out. 20 armored pods shot out from the Indomitable. They accelerated toward the nearest Kragath capital ship. The enemy's point defense tried to shoot them down, but the pods were small and fast. Most reached their target. The boarding torpedoes struck the Kragath ship's hull with tremendous force. Shaped charges detonated, blowing holes through the armor. Then the pods opened and Marines poured out. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing the breach point and pushing into the ship's interior. The Kragath crew had never experienced anything like this. Their training focused on operating ship systems and conducting long-range combat. They had no doctrine for repelling boarders. They had no weapons designed for close combat inside a ship. They were helpless. Minji led her team through the corridors. They moved in tight formation, covering each other and clearing rooms with brutal efficiency. Any Kragath who tried to resist was neutralized quickly. Those who surrendered were restrained and moved to secure areas. "Bridge located," one of her sergeants reported. "Heavy resistance expected. Breach and clear," Minji ordered. "Non-lethal if possible. We want prisoners." The Marines placed charges on the bridge door and blew it open. They flooded inside with weapons ready. The Kragath bridge crew reached for their sidearms, but they were too slow. Stun rounds dropped them before they could fire a shot. In 15 minutes, Colonel Minji stood on the bridge of a captured Kragath capital ship. She opened a channel to the Indomitable. "Captain, the ship is secure. We have prisoners and we are accessing their computer systems now." Commander Hyun listened to this exchange with growing disbelief. They captured an enemy capital ship? In 15 minutes? His tactical officer nodded slowly. "Sir, I am reading similar actions across the battlefield. The Terrans have boarded 12 Kragath vessels. They are fighting inside the enemy ships. This is unlike anything in our military database." Hyun realized something profound. The Terrans were not fighting a space battle. They were fighting a war. There was a difference. Space battles were about ships and tactics and technology. War was about winning by any means necessary. It was about breaking the enemy's will to fight, and the Kragath had never faced an enemy like this. On Empress Valkara's flagship, alarms blared constantly. Her tactical officer was shouting reports in a panic. 15 ships boarded, 23 vessels damaged. The enemy is inside our formation." Valkara could not understand what was happening. The Terrans should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, they were tearing her fleet apart. Their tactics made no sense. They were aggressive to the point of insanity. They did not follow any known combat doctrine. "High Admiral Dorim," she snarled. "Explain this." Dorim's face appeared on the screen. He looked shaken. "Empress, the enemy is using tactics I have never encountered. They combine long-range weapons with close combat. They board our ships and fight us inside. They do not care about losses. They only care about victory." "Then destroy them," Valkara screamed. "I am trying," Dorim replied. But for the first time in his career, he sounded uncertain. In 6 hours of combat, the Kragath fleet lost 40% of its ships. The survivors were damaged and demoralized, and the Terran fleet was still fighting with the same intensity as when the battle began. Finally, impossibly, High Admiral Dorim gave the order he had never thought he would speak. "All ships retreat. Fall back to defensive positions." The Kragath fleet began to withdraw, but the Terrans did not stop. They pursued like wolves chasing wounded prey. The message was clear: there would be no escape. There would be no mercy. There would only be the end. The Velthrin Defense Council chamber was filled with holographic displays showing the battle footage. Commander Hyun stood at the center, replaying the human combat operations for the third time. Around him, military analysts from 6 different species watched in stunned silence. "Here," Hyun said, pointing to a specific moment. "The Terran ship takes damage that would destroy any of our vessels. But look at the crew response. No panic, no evacuation. They simply seal the damaged sections and continue fighting. How is this possible? A Trilaxian observer named Kelthix leaned forward. He was a military strategist with 300 years of experience. His species had witnessed countless wars, but he had never seen anything like this. They train for catastrophic damage, Kelthix said slowly. Most species design ships to avoid being hit. The humans design ships expecting to be hit. Every system has backup systems. Every backup has its own backup. They call it redundancy, but why? Asked an Osuran delegate. It makes their ships heavier and slower. It seems inefficient. It seems inefficient until your ship is crippled and you are still fighting, Hyun replied. The humans understand something we forgot. You do not win wars by having the best technology. You win by still being able to fight when everything goes wrong. Another display showed Colonel Minji's boarding action. The analysts watched as human marines moved through the Kragath ship with brutal efficiency. Every movement was practiced. Every decision was instant. They cleared rooms faster than most species could assess the threat. They have done this before, Kelthix said. Not just trained for it. Actually done it. These tactics come from real experience, Hyun nodded. I spoke with Captain Ji-won about human history. Did you know they have been fighting each other for their entire existence? They have records of wars dating back 10,000 years. They have fought on every type of terrain, in every environment, against enemies using every conceivable tactic. They fight their own species? The Osuran delegate seemed horrified. That is barbaric. Perhaps, Hyun agreed. But it made them the most effective warriors in the galaxy. Every human strategy has been tested in real combat. Every tactic has been refined through generations of war. They do not theorize about combat. They know it intimately. On the Indomitable's bridge, Captain Ji-won was reviewing the tactical situation. The immediate battle was won, but Empress Valkyra was sending reinforcements. 400 ships were en route. They would arrive soon. Captain, her communications officer said, we are receiving transmissions from multiple species. The Trilaxian Union, the Osuran Collective, and 12 other civilizations are requesting permission to send observer ships. Observer ships? Ji-won raised an eyebrow. Not military support. Just observers. Yes, ma'am. They want to watch but not participate. Ji-won felt a flash of anger. These species had refused to help the Velthrin, but now they wanted to watch humans fight. She opened a channel to Commander Hyun. Commander, it seems we have attracted an audience. Hyun appeared on her screen. He looked tired but hopeful. Captain, I must ask, can you truly stand against 400 Kragath vessels? I do not doubt your courage, but the numbers seem impossible. Commander, I am going to tell you something my grandfather taught me. He was a soldier who fought in the water wars on Earth. He said, numbers matter, but will matters more. The Kragath have more ships, but we have more reason to fight. They fight for conquest. We fight to stop genocide. Which side do you think will give up first? Hyun considered this. But you do not even know my people. Why risk everything for strangers? Ji-won smiled. Because someone called for help and we answered. That is what decent people do. Besides, we are not facing 400 ships alone. I called for reinforcements. You have reinforcements? Hyun felt hope surge through him. The Terran Second Fleet is arriving in 4 hours. Admiral Kwan commands 30 ships. Combined with my 12, we will have 42 vessels. 42 against 400, Hyun said quietly. Still impossible odds? Probably, Ji-won agreed cheerfully. But we have been beating impossible odds since we climbed down from the trees and decided to fight animals 10 times our size with pointed sticks. We are very good at being the underdog. She closed the channel and turned to her crew. All hands, prepare for round 2. Get some rest, get some food, and check your equipment. The real fight is about to begin. 4 hours later, space rippled as the Terran Second Fleet arrived. 30 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. They were larger than the First Fleet vessels and heavily armed. At their center was the flagship TCS Defiant. Admiral Kwan's face appeared on every screen in the system. He was an older man with gray hair and scars on his face. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion and the Titan campaign. He had seen humanity's worst wars and survived them all. This is Admiral Kwan of the Terran Second Fleet. We received Captain Ji-won's report. We came to finish this fight. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Captain, status report. Ji-won quickly briefed him on the situation. The defeated Kragath ships. The prisoners taken. The incoming reinforcements from Empress Valkyra Kwan listened carefully and nodded. You did well. Now let us show these conquerors what happens when they threaten innocent people. All ships, battle formation Sierra 7, we are going to meet them at the hyperspace exit point. Sir, one of his officers said. They still outnumber us 9-1. Good, Quan replied. Then we do not have to aim. The combined Terran fleet took position at the edge of the system. They waited for the Kragath reinforcements. The observer ships from other species watched from a safe distance. No one spoke. Everyone knew they were about to witness something historic. Empress Valkyra's reinforcement fleet arrived in a massive wave. 400 warships filled the space with their bulk. They immediately began moving into attack formation. The Empress herself was with this fleet, commanding from her new flagship. Terran vessels, Valkyra's voice boomed across all channels. You have interfered with Kragath business for the last time. Surrender now or be destroyed. Admiral Quan opened a channel in response. Empress Valkyra, I am Admiral Quan. I have 42 ships against your 400. Any reasonable species would surrender. But humans are not particularly reasonable. We are going to destroy your fleet, capture you, and put an end to your empire's brutality. You have one chance to surrender and save your people's lives. Valkyra laughed. You are insane. I have seen the footage. Your tactics are chaotic and your losses are high. You cannot win this. Our losses are high because we fight, Quan said. You have been conquering species who gave up after losing a few ships. We do not give up ever. That is the difference between us. Valkyra's response was to open fire. 400 ships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. The volume of fire was incredible. Space lit up with energy beams and explosions. The Terran fleet did not retreat. They did not even try to evade. They activated a tactic that made every observer's blood run cold. All ships execute Thermopylae protocol, Quan ordered. The 42 Terran vessels formed a tight defensive wall. Their overlapping shields and armor created a barrier of metal and energy. They anchored themselves in space and became an immovable object. The Kragath fleet crashed against them like waves against a cliff. Ships fired until their weapons overheated. Energy beams splashed harmlessly against layered defenses. Missiles detonated on armor plates, and the Terrans returned fire with devastating accuracy. Every shot counted. Every weapon was aimed at critical systems. They could not match the Kragath's volume of fire, but they did not need to. They needed only to be more efficient. This is not battle, Celtics whispered from his observer ship. This is murder. The humans have turned their fleet into a fortress, Commander Hyun watched in awe. They are not trying to outmaneuver the enemy. They are simply too tough to kill, and while the Kragath waste ammunition, the humans are picking them apart piece by piece. Dr. Yuna, a human xenopsychologist aboard the Indomitable, was taking notes. She had been studying the Kragath psychology throughout the battle. Now she spoke to Captain Jiwon. Captain, the Kragath are beginning to break. Their doctrine is built on intimidation and overwhelming force. When that fails, they have no backup plan. They do not know how to fight an enemy that refuses to be intimidated. Jiwon nodded. How long until complete collapse? Hours, maybe less. Once they realize they cannot win, their morale will shatter. Jiwon opened a channel to Admiral Quan. Sir, Dr. Yuna believes the enemy is close to psychological collapse. Request permission to deploy intimidation tactic Gamma. Quan smiled grimly. Granted. Let us end this. The Terran fleet suddenly changed tactics. They broke formation and charged forward. Every ship selected a target and engaged at point-blank range. It was chaos. It was madness. And it was exactly what the Kragath feared most, because in chaos, training and experience mattered more than numbers. And humans had both in abundance. The battle became a knife fight in space. Ships collided. Marines boarded enemy vessels. Weapons fired at ranges measured in meters rather than kilometers. It was brutal and personal and terrifying. The Kragath had never experienced anything like it. They had fought organized battles with clear lines and proper formations. This was war without rules. This was survival. The stars above SciFiPrime had never looked so dark. Commander Hyun stood on the bridge of the orbital defense station, watching his world burn below. Across the viewscreen, 17 cities blazed with fire as Kragath bombardment struck civilian centers without mercy. The sight made his 3 hearts ache with a pain he had never known in his 60 years of service. Another defensive platform is down, his tactical officer reported. The young Velthran's voice trembled as he spoke. That leaves us with only 4 remaining in the outer ring. Hyun nodded slowly. The Kragath Empire had arrived 3 days ago with 300 warships. The Velthrin had 30 vessels to defend their home system. It was not even a fair fight. It was an execution. The Kragath were a warrior species. They believed in strength above all else. For 200 years they had conquered system after system, enslaving peaceful races and taking their resources. Now they wanted HFY. The planet sat on a strategic hyperspace lane that would give them access to 70 more systems. The Velthrin were simply in the way. Send another distress call, Hyun ordered. Broadcast on all channels. Universal frequency. Sir, we have sent 47 distress calls. No one is coming. His communications officer looked defeated. The Tralaxian Union sent their regrets. The Osern Collective voted against intervention. The other powers are too afraid of the Kragath. Hyun understood. The Kragath had the largest military fleet in known space. Their ships were powerful and their tactics were proven. Any species that challenged them faced destruction. The galactic powers had chosen survival over honor. He could not blame them, but he could hate them for it. On the view screen, another explosion blossomed in the darkness. The defense station at Marker 7 had been destroyed. Hyun watched as debris and bodies scattered into the void. 3,000 Velthrin had been stationed there. Now they were gone. Empress Valkara is hailing us, the communications officer said quietly. Put her through. The view screen changed to show the Kragath Empress. She was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with dark purple skin and 4 arms. Her eyes glowed red with satisfaction. Behind her, Hyun could see the bridge of her flagship. It was decorated with the banners of conquered worlds. Commander Hyun, Valkara said. Her voice was deep and cold. Your resistance has been entertaining but pointless. Surrender now, and I will allow your people to live as workers in our empire. Refuse and every Velthrin will die today. Hyun straightened his posture. My people will never serve you. Valkara laughed. The sound echoed across the bridge like thunder. Then watch them die. High Admiral Dorim, begin the final assault. The transmission ended. Across the system, the Kragath fleet began moving into attack formation. Their ships were massive and dark, covered in armor plating that could withstand most conventional weapons. The Velthrin had tried everything. Energy weapons barely scratched their hulls. Missiles were shot down by their point defense systems. Kinetic weapons were absorbed by their shields. The Kragath had been fighting wars for 1,000 years. They knew every trick. They had seen every tactic. They were unbeatable. Sir, we have incoming, Tactical called out. 200 enemy vessels are advancing on our position. They will be in firing range in 10 minutes. Hyun looked at his crew. They were young. Most had joined the defense force because they believed in peace and protecting their families. Now they would die in the void of space far from home. It was not fair. It was not right. But it was happening. Keep broadcasting the distress signal, Hyun said quietly. Someone must hear us. Someone must care. His communications officer worked in silence for several minutes. Then he looked up with confusion on his face. Sir, we are receiving a response. Hyun felt a spark of hope. From who? The Trilaxians changed their minds? No, sir. The signal is coming from Sector 7743. The coordinates place it at the edge of known space. That region is supposed to be uninhabited. What does the message say? The communications officer listened carefully to his equipment. It says, message received. We are coming. Hold position. The transmission signature identifies them as the Terran Coalition. Terran? Hyun had never heard that name. What species is that? I do not know, sir. They are not in our database. But according to the signal strength, they are close. Very close. Suddenly, alarms began blaring across the bridge. The tactical officer shouted in surprise. Sir, massive spatial distortions detected at grid reference Alpha 7. Something is coming out of hyperspace. Multiple contacts. 12 signatures? No. 15. No, the count keeps changing. On the view screen, space itself seemed to tear open. Bright blue light spilled out like water from a broken dam. Then ships began emerging. They were unlike anything Hyun had ever seen. The vessels were angular and gray, covered in strange markings and what looked like armor plates bolted to their hulls. They were smaller than Kragath ships, but there was something aggressive about their design. They looked like they were built for one purpose: fighting. Get me a count, Hyun ordered. 12 vessels confirmed, Tactical reported. They are maintaining formation at the system's edge. Mass sensors indicate they are heavily armed, but their power signatures are strange. I cannot identify their weapon systems. 12 ships against 300. It was insane. These newcomers would be destroyed in minutes. But at least someone had answered the call. At least someone cared enough to try. Open a channel to the lead vessel, Hyun ordered. Channel open, sir. Hyun took a deep breath. Unknown vessels, this is Commander Hyun of the Velthran Defense Council. We thank you for responding to our distress call, but you must retreat immediately. The Kragath Empire has overwhelming force. You will be destroyed if you engage them. There was a brief pause. Then a voice replied. It was speaking Galactic Standard, but with an unusual accent. The voice belonged to someone who sounded calm and utterly unafraid. Commander Hyun, this is Captain Ji-won of the Terran Coalition ship Indomitable. We received your distress signal and traced it through abandoned relay stations. We understand the situation. We are not retreating. Hyun felt confusion and gratitude mixing together. Captain Ji-won, there are 300 enemy vessels. You have 12 ships. This is not a battle you can win. Commander, Captain Ji-won replied, and now there was something hard in her voice. Something that made Hyun pause. We did not travel 400 light years to run away. We are going to stop this. Trust us. Before Hyun could respond, another transmission cut through. It was High Admiral Doram of the Kragath fleet. His voice boomed with arrogance. Unknown vessels, you have entered a Kragath military operation. Identify yourselves immediately and retreat or be destroyed. The response from Captain Ji-won was instant and clear. This is the Terran Coalition. You are engaging in an act of genocide. We are here to stop you, Doram laughed. 12 ships? Your species must be insane. Very well. You will die first. The Kragath fleet opened fire. Energy beams lanced across space toward the Terran vessels. Hyun closed his eyes, expecting to see the newcomers vaporized, but when he opened his eyes, the Terran ships were accelerating forward. They were not raising shields. They were not evading. They were charging directly into the Kragath fleet at full speed. And somehow, impossibly, they were still intact.